Hey, happy holidays! So today I am coming to you with the brand spanking new IOD molds. This one is Holly Lane, and as you can see, it's just full, just chock full of holly and berries and pine cones. Love. And then we also have this gorgeous one called Blitz, and it's the most gorgeous ornate snowflakes. Love them. We're also going to be using a bit of the Iron Orchid Designs air dry clay, one of their silicone blades. I'm using the big one because it's easier for me. And then I'm also using some of these really awesome Target brand. These are from the Bullseye department, which is basically like their 5 and under bins. And this is from Target. It was a $5 bread bowl essentially, and it's going to be what I use for my snowflakes. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just press in the air dry clay right into this mold. And as you guys know, the IOD clay is just so wonderfully, there's really no word for me to describe besides like creamy. It's just the perfect consistency, and I've been working with clay for years. Before IOD came out with their brand, it was Paperclay, and Paperclay was kind of my favorite. Now there's just something about this texture for me, and the way that it dries so beautifully. I love the IOD clay. Now you're probably wondering, why are you wearing gloves? For me, I don't know what it is. I can't stand having stuff on my fingers. It drives me bonkers, so I just go ahead and wear the gloves. And I'm just kind of taking and pressing it in and sort of smoothing it down. I do not need like a super thick amount of it. In fact, this mold is pretty thin. So like you don't have like a really deep bed to the mold. So you're not going to have to use a ton of clay. And for some people, it's easier for them to start off with like a larger piece of clay and just kind of press in and move it around. I tend to do the whole tear. Just small pieces. It all comes together beautifully once you press it into the mold. And I am going to use this big one to begin with. Once I've done the big one and I see just how much surface area I have to work with, I'll decide if I'm going to add any additional snowflakes to it. Okay, from here, I can kind of just smooth out and rub the silicone blade right smack over the surface. Make sure I have a nice even distribution of clay. It also kind of helps get the air bubbles out. And then as I get towards the end, I just sort of go back and sort of refine my edges. IOD has that wonderful edge, the lip to all their molds. So it means that everything comes out nice and crisp and you don't have any little snaggly edges, assuming that you kind of take full advantage of those. So I just smooth them all out so that that lip is really visible. Turn this puppy upside down and release, okay? That is all of the detail with clay. Super impressive, okay? And the one thing I forgot to mention, obviously, in the beginning of this is you really need to dust these molds with your cornstarch or whatever release powder you're going to be using, talcum powder, whatever, because they will totally get stuck in there if you don't have them. So now at this point, you can go ahead, pick this piece up. We can put a little bit of Tight Bond or even Aleene's tacky glue would be fine. And we're going to sort of adhere it over the lip and the edge of this little bread bowl. Okay, so let me go ahead and come back with the Titebond. All right, so Titebond, quick and thick, multi-surface glue. What I do is I unscrew the lid and I kind of just give myself a little dollop to work with. I also like using these. They are a kitchen tool, but I bought mine at the thrift store for dirt cheap. It helps with these pieces that are really, really thin and detailed. And I'm gonna come in with some of my tacky glue. Now everybody's a little bit different in terms of how they like to apply. I just kind of prefer to use my finger just because then I can kind of push it around and control just how much is going on. I don't necessarily want so much that it's gonna ooze out, but I also don't want there to be too little so it doesn't fully adhere. And like I said, I really wanted this to kind of come up and over some of these edges a bit. So the snowflakes moved with the bowl itself. And I'm gently tapping this down, hopefully getting out any little air bubbles that may be in there. Kind of get some of those little crumbly bits out of the way. All right, that's lovely. Just lovely. I think I am going to add a couple of other little pieces. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and chalk paint my bowl. I'm calling it a bread bowl because it's basically a bread bowl, but it's more of like a decorative tray than anything else. Our trays are good and dry. I went ahead and did the white paint over the wet clay and stuck these outside. And we have 103-degree weather, so just a couple of hours out there and these suckers were good. I did not paint the bottom. I kind of like the bottom like that. In fact, I was kind of thinking about putting those little rubber feet on the bottom just so that it's nice and raised off of the table surface. So I'm going to go ahead and antique these. This is just a little bit of a kind of a medium value brown, and I'm going to spritz it with water. Get my brush nice and wet here, and you don't want a ton. Because you just want a little bit of antiquing to kind of get into all your little grooves, to work their way in and around. And if you want to, you can even kind of spritz, because again, this is nice and dry. If this was wet, I wouldn't suggest it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off the entire thing, and then basically before it dries, I'm just going to kind of come in here and lift and remove any of the excess that I don't want. I just want it to kind of show up in all the little groovies. This isn't new for you guys for the most part. This is pretty cut and dry. So we went ahead and dried this up for the most part. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and come in with some sort of a sanding block and rough up my edges, kind of bring some more of the natural wood tone back, especially around the curves and the edges. If you have an electric sander, this obviously goes a lot faster. Okay, so I have a little bit of gold paint here. I like using my finger and I kind of blot off, make sure that there's not too much so that I can control sort of the light dusting of gold that's hit with the highlights on this. And you can do as much or as little as you'd like. I always sort of feel like less is more, but you know, it really depends on your personal preference and taste. You might like really bold gold and it just, you know, really works for you. So do this any way you'd like. And in fact, super, super pretty is like if you wanted to do this with like a pine green or a cranberry red, it would also be lovely. I think it's always you know, for these tutorials, it's almost easier to go with neutrals because you guys all know that you can run with different colors for your own personal styles, but at least this way the neutrality kind of works for just about everybody to cover the gist of the project. The final situation with our pretty little trays here is that I'm going to do a very thin coat of resin over the surface. This way, if you wanted to, you could have like a little soap sitting on here, you know, you've got options, okay? So I've already taken the liberty of mixing up a small amount of my Amazing Cast clear resin. This takes 6 to 8 hours to cure. I have 1 tablespoon of A, 1 tablespoon of B. I've already thoroughly mixed them together so they're ready to go. And what I really want to be sure about is that I want to make sure I don't make a big gloopy mess. So I just want to get like a real thin coat on this and a real thin coat in here. I don't want it dripping off the edge making a huge mess because then you lose all the beauty of the beautiful wood grain down there. If it happens, don't worry about it. You know, you can always sand some of it off if you really want to. So I'm gonna take my little foam brush here and I'm gonna start by kind of brushing some off because like I said, I don't wanna have a ton. I just want a little bit. So just enough to kind of protect the outer rim. All right, so I'm kind of coming in and around my little snowflakes that are draped over the edges here, making sure that those get coated. You don't need a ton of resin. If you start at the top and kind of work your way down, you will be just fine. You don't have to pour on tons. And then just like you would with paint, you're just gonna kind of paint on and you'll see exactly where you have resin and where you still need to put resin. So I'm just painting this on. Nice, thin, even layer of resin.